Imagine dying on the battlefield, only to wake up on the same morning and relive your death again and again. That is exactly what happens to Enkrid, a soldier whose dream of becoming a knight refuses to die even if he does. The story begins with a cook waking up the soldiers as the sound of metal clanging echoes through the camp. Enkrid opens his eyes while everyone inside the tent prepares for battle. A soldier beside him suddenly complains that there is something inside his boot. After checking it, he shouts that it is a bug. Enkrid wonders what all the noise is about so early in the morning. Enkrid is the commander of the men staying in that tent. They are a squad of misfits who constantly cause trouble. Later that evening, the battle finally begins. Soldiers charge toward the enemy army as both sides clash on the battlefield. Enkrid struggles to keep up during the fight. An enemy soldier tackles him to the ground, causing him to lose his grip on his sword before repeatedly punching him. An allied soldier kills the enemy and saves Enkrid. He quickly reaches for his sword and starts running while avoiding the enemy soldiers around him. Suddenly, an arrow flies toward him. He barely avoids it, but the arrow strikes and kills the soldier behind him instead. Before Enkrid can react, another enemy soldier appears in front of him and thrusts a sword into his neck. As his consciousness begins to fade, only one thought remains in his mind. He wanted to become a knight. It was an old and tattered dream that he had held onto too tightly. After dying, Enkrid awakens in complete darkness. Someone is standing in front of him, but he cannot make out the person's face because his vision is too blurry. Then the sound of metal clanging echoes once again. Enkrid suddenly wakes up inside the same tent. Confused, he wonders if everything was just a dream. At that moment, the soldier beside him says there is something inside his boot before shouting that it is a bug. Enkrid is left wondering if he is experiencing déjà vu. When the battle begins again, every event unfolds exactly as before. He is killed once more by the same soldier. The same thing happens a third time. After dying for the fourth time, Enkrid finally accepts the truth. The feeling of the enemy's sword piercing his neck, the pain and the blood pouring from his throat are all the same every single time. He realizes that he is reliving the same day over and over again. As the battle begins once more, Enkrid sees the same soldier approaching to kill him again. This time, he does not panic. He faces the enemy head-on and tells himself that he will conquer this wall. Enkrid had wielded a sword since he was young. He learned swordsmanship from a retired mercenary who had visited his village by chance. The man was impressed and told Enkrid he could become a knight. From that moment, Enkrid dreamed of being a knight who could defeat 1,000 men, change the tide of battle, and end wars, the legendary Knight of the End. He believed himself the hero of a minstrel's song. But when he left his village, mercenaries mocked him. They called him too cowardly to even be a free mercenary. Entering a mercenary corps, Enkrid learned that his talent was nothing special. Still, he refused to give up. He believed hard work never betrayed effort. Over the years, he gained experience, endurance, and recognition. That belief began to crack when a 12-year-old boy, who had trained for only 6 months, challenged him to a duel. Despite over a decade of training, Enkrid was weaker. He wondered if all his effort had been for nothing. Determined not to quit, he trained harder, cutting down on food and sleep. Eventually, he joined the kingdom's Cyprus division and became commander of a second-rate squad, the highest position he could achieve. Enkrid faced the tip of a blade for the 17th time. It was his 17th death. He thought that if he had forged his sword with more effort and trained harder, maybe things would be different. A voice told him to stop struggling and give in to despair before an uncrossable wall. The sound of clashing steel filled his ears and Enkrid woke up. One of his men remarked that the squad commander had woken early. Enkrid told Rem that he had bugs in his boots. When Rem saw the insect inside he asked if Enkrid had put it there. Enkrid denied it, saying he had seen it earlier. He thought to himself that this was the 18th time he had seen the bug and wondered if seeing it again would free him from this repeating day. One morning, he asked Jackson to take his duty rotation. Enkrid told Rem he wanted to learn the Heart of the Beast technique again. Rem reminded him that he had failed before. Enkrid remembered the battle between Nalilia and Aspen. He had died there and was forced to relive the same day over and over. Even after learning the Heart of the Beast from Rem, he could not track the sword that always killed him. On his 21st attempt, he had memorized the entire battlefield. He dodged a spear from behind, saved a squad member from an arrow, and killed an enemy soldier. But the man he saved still died moments later. His final challenge was the enemy soldier who had killed him 20 times. For the first time, Enkrid could see the tip of the man's blade and dodged it. His heart raced. But before he could counterattack, the soldier struck his neck and killed him again. Enkrid awoke in a strange place before a boatman. The boatman told him to give up, accept his weakness, and find peace. Enkrid refused, saying that day would never come. He woke once more on the same morning. This time he was focused. On the 22nd day, he was ready to face the battle again. It was Enkrid's 33rd time. He thought he could dodge the enemy blade. He moved before the sword reached him. But the enemy was too fast. The strike grazed his neck and his necklace broke. Enkrid remembered where it came from. During his time as a mercenary, he had once accepted a request to subjugate monsters. He had stumbled upon a poor village and decided to help. His dream had always been to become a knight, and to protect the weak was the duty of a knight. Afterward, an old man from the village gave him a reward. It was a necklace. He said their village was too poor to offer anything more. He told Enkrid that the charm would grant what he most desperately prayed for. Now that necklace lay on the ground. Enkrid wondered if this was the reason for his endless loop. Was he repeating each day after death so that he could become a knight? His thoughts were cut off when the enemy soldier smiled and said he must be in pain and offered him mercy. With that, Enkrid was killed again. He woke once more on the morning of the battle. The cycle repeated. He continued training with Rem in the heart of the beast. When Rem saw Enkrid's movement, he was shocked. He asked what Enkrid was doing. He said Enkrid's aura had grown stronger. Enkrid replied that he had simply trained. Rem denied it. He said no one could learn his family's secret technique so quickly. Yet Enkrid had already grasped the basics. Enkrid thought about it. It was as Rem said. It was a sensation he had learned from death itself. He asked for another sparring match. He thought to himself that even if he mastered the heart of the beast, he would still die if he could not land a strike first. The only sword technique he possessed was the Valen mercenary sword technique. It was an unusual style created by a mercenary named Valen. Many called it a petty trick, but it was the most reliable technique he had. During training, Enkrid subconsciously mimicked the stabbing attack of the enemy soldier who had killed him more than 10 times. Rem reacted instantly and deflected it. Enkrid was shocked. His body had remembered the stab from death. Rem said that among all of Enkrid's strikes so far, this one was the most proper. Enkrid asked what to do if such an attack was blocked. Rem replied bluntly that Enkrid should go for the kill and never let go of his sword. Enkrid understood. The difference between his stab and the enemy soldier's stab was confidence. The enemy stabbed with the will to kill. Enkrid's hesitation had weakened his strikes. So the cycle continued. He repeated the day. He trained. He died. He took one step at a time, even if only a quarter step. On the 124th day, Enkrid finally pushed back Rem in training. His hand was bleeding, yet he laughed like a madman. He had finally mastered the deadly stab of his enemy. Enkrid moved with pure murderous intent. He aimed for the enemy's helmet, but his first strike failed. Even after being stabbed, he did not blink. His sword stayed in his hand. When the enemy offered him mercy, Enkrid replied that tomorrow he would die. The enemy stabbed again and said the dead have no tomorrow. The moment Enkrid woke, he was ready. He told Rem to take the guard duty instead of training. Rem wondered why Enkrid was giving orders so casually. It was the 125th day. Enkrid then called another subordinate and told him to bring Shin armor, a shield and a dagger. He promised to pay later. His sudden decisiveness surprised everyone. Enkrid trained while thinking about the endless cycle. He felt pain every time he died. He refused to be content with his current strength. He vowed to surpass the wall in front of him. He would learn how to stab. He would not abandon this blessing. With Shingard's dagger and shield, he prepared for battle again. He remembered that surviving a war without skill required 3 things: preparation, luck, a cool head. On the 46th day, his shoulder had been shattered by a spike mace. On the 47th day, he dodged that mace but was killed by another soldier. On the 71st day, an enemy cut his foot and left him helpless before the stabbing soldier he called his wall. On the 89th day, his head was split by a thrown axe. That axe thrower often disrupted his fight with the wall, so letting him live was never an option. Over countless loops, Enkrid trained in throwing weapons and could now kill the axe thrower easily. But the soldier named Vel always appeared behind him. Enkrid protected Vel from an arrow. Then came a sniper known as the Claw of the Hawk. Enkrid had no time to deal with him. It was time to face the wall. After avoiding every threat he had faced before, Enkrid once again stood before his enemy. He blocked with his shield, which broke under the force. Dodging and stabbing alone gave him no chance. The man was only a regular soldier, but almost at the level of a prodigy. He lacked real combat experience, which made him easy to surprise. Enkrid used the Valen mercenary sword technique with its many variations. He kicked dirt into the enemy's eyes and prepared to strike. The enemy tried his signature stabbing attack, but Enkrid dodged. The man spun and stabbed again, but Enkrid deflected it. His counter broke the enemy's sword. An arrow from the Claw of the Hawk was aimed directly at Enkrid, but he focused only on the wall before him. The arrow flew toward him, but an axe smashed it apart. Rem had thrown it. With that opening, Enkrid killed his wall at last. He looked down on the man and said, "This is mercy." With one blow, he beheaded him. A grin spread across his face. He had broken through the wall. Then a heavy strike hit him and sent him flying. Pain surged through his body. A new enemy stood before him. Rem charged toward his squad leader. The man who struck Enkrid was no ordinary soldier. The frog man stood over Enkrid. He said he had invested a lot in raising his soldier, and could not believe someone like Enkrid had defeated him. He raised his weapon to kill him. Before the strike could land, Rem appeared. His blows were fierce and precise. Even the frogman struggled to block them. A soldier with a spear moved in to kill Enkrid, but was beheaded by Jackson in a single swing. Rem and the frogman clashed again. Rem said that if he wanted to take the squad commander's head, he would need his permission. The frogman was surprised to hear that Enkrid was the commander. he called him a weakling. Rem stayed silent but thought to himself that the warrior race of frogs were born to fight. To kill this one, he would need to burn him with magic or pierce his heart in one strike. It would be a hassle. The frogman was also calculating. Killing Rem would mean risking his own life. This battlefield was not worth it. He turned and walked away. Rem called him a coward. Jackson carried Enkrid on his back. Rem joined the squad and they surrounded their commander. The enemy army retreated. Enkrid lost consciousness. On a dark river, a man stood on a boat. He told Enkrid that he had survived one more day, but that walls would continue to appear in his path. One day he would despair and give up. Enkrid stood and replied that walls existed to be overcome. The boatman, who was Death, said he would wait for the day when Enkrid's ambition lost its light. Enkrid awoke in the infirmary. Rem sat beside him. He told him he had slept for 2 days and reminded him that he had saved him from the frogman. Enkrid thought it was a miracle he survived that kick. Rem said his bones were not broken but his head had been badly shaken. He then asked if Enkrid remembered him as his best friend. It was a new day and Enkrid had survived again. Cries entered and demanded triple repayment for getting him into the infirmary. Enkrid asked why he was nowhere to be seen during the battle. Craze avoided the question and said he would give a special discount if Enkrid paid back double. At dawn, Jackson visited. Enkrid asked what he wanted. Jackson handed him ointment and told him to apply it morning and evening. He warned him not to ask where it came from and left. Later, Auden visited. He mumbled and cried. Enkrid told him to leave. That night, Enkrid thought about how the squad members had been taking turns to watch over him, when before they had always done as they pleased. Even Ragna appeared, asked if he was in the infirmary, and left. Enkrid doubted Ragna cared. In the infirmary there were also 2 other soldiers. One was a platoon commander from another company who often picked fights with Enkrid. The other was a nameless low-ranking soldier who only stared into space. Enkrid wondered how he had ended up there. Then the tent opened. A woman with long hair and elf-like ears stepped inside. She asked who the commander of the 444th squad was. Enkrid was left puzzled. The woman stepped into the infirmary and caught the attention of the platoon commander from another company, who muttered that she is a fairy. She asked which group he belonged to. He introduced himself as Vengeance, commander of the 3rd platoon of the 2nd company. Realizing she outranked him, he quickly apologized. Enkrid observed the exchange and recognized her as the new commander of the 4th company. Enkrid introduced himself as commander of the 4th squad in the 4th company's 4th platoon. The woman praised him for managing his difficult squad members and said she was looking forward to his contributions. Before leaving, she asked the blonde-haired man in the infirmary for his name. He hesitated, then said, Krang. Enkrid suspected he had made it up, noting his poor attitude even in front of a commander. That night, Enkrid felt most of his pain fade. Determined to train, he began replaying the last battle in his mind to refine his techniques. He reminded himself not to rely entirely on one attack, as failure would mean death. While he was practicing, the blonde-haired man approached and asked why he was working so hard. Enkrid explained he was replicating the battle to strengthen his grip. When asked why, he replied, "So I don't die." The man then questioned if surviving meant Enkrid wanted to become something more. Enkrid thought about his long-held dream, one others had always mocked. He finally said, "I want to be a knight." To his surprise, the man did not laugh, instead saying he remembered what he needed to do after watching Enkrid. Before leaving, he told Enkrid, "If you become a knight, remember my name, friend." Later, soldiers sang outside about the hero of the battlefield, chanting Cyprus. The 3rd platoon commander complained about the morning rations. On his walk, he met Jackson, who asked about his injuries. Enkrid thanked him, saying the medicine worked well. Jackson told him to return soon. That night, the blonde man wished him good night. When Enkrid awoke the next morning, he again heard soldiers chanting Cyprus, and saw the same sequence of events play out. The 3rd platoon commander once again complained about the rations. Enkrid realized the day was repeating. He suspected he had died in his sleep without meeting the man on the boat. This time, the enemy's face was unknown, and the kill had been silent. He reasoned the killer must have bypassed all defenses, a feat only possible for a knight, yet unlikely. That meant the assassin was probably among them, someone who knew the location of the medical barracks. Thinking back to the woman commander, he noted her quiet and nimble movements, perfect for an assassin. Her visit could have been to scout the location. Enkrid decided to watch the single entrance to the barracks and alert the others at the first sign of her. But before he could act, a needle pierced his neck. Numbing poison paralyzed him, making him unable to move or speak. He realized this was likely how he had died before. Commander Vengeance was also killed by a poisoned needle, while Krang was cut down by a sword. Then the tent was slashed open, and one more assassins appeared. In that moment, Enkrid understood. The company leader herself was one of the assassins. After experiencing the same morning 3 times in a row, Enkrid stayed alert. He still could not detect the presence of the assassin. This would not be easy. Even if he managed to stop the assassin, he would have to face the company commander right after. The thought left him feeling helpless. He remembered the same feeling from a few days ago, when he faced an enemy's stabbing attack. Despite the odds, he had won that time. He told himself he would find a way as long as he did not give up. Enkrid checked the bed where Vengeance usually slept. He thought the assassin might already be hiding there, but he was wrong. Vengeance taunted him and Enkrid replied sarcastically, which only made Vengeance angrier. Krang then walked in. Enkrid considered that the assassin seemed to focus on Krang, which made him suspicious. Enkrid asked Krang what he was. Krang replied that it was not something he could tell him. When Enkrid said okay, Vengeance mocked Enkrid for accepting such an answer. He pointed at Krang and accused him of not being from this country, and demanded to know which nation's spy he was. Krang walked towards him and said, "I'm not an enemy of this kingdom." Enkrid noticed that Krang had the aura and movements of a knight, but was powerless against the assassin. He was hiding something. That night they wished each other good night. Enkrid was ready. If the assassin broke in, they would all die, so he stepped outside. Vengeance asked if he was leaving instead of sleeping. Enkrid told him that assassins would invade soon, and they should cooperate if they wanted to live. Vengeance dismissed him. A voice said, "How did he know?" Moments later a needle pierced Enkrid's neck. The assassin killed Vengeance with the poison needle as well and Krang with a sword. Enkrid woke up again to the same morning. This was the fourth time. With no proof of the assassin's presence, he could not get help from Vengeance or Krang. He reported to his superiors instead, but they mocked him and threatened him. That night he was ready again, but the assassin killed him before he could react. He tried hiding outside the tent to ambush them, but was killed again. Enkrid realized that as long as he could not avoid the poison needle, he would always die. 20 mornings passed in the same loop, and he had achieved nothing. He needed a way to avoid the attack faster than the assassin could see. While walking through the camp he saw Jackson and remembered a conversation with Rem. Rem had told him that Jackson never fought head-on. He enjoyed striking from the shadows and fleeing like a wild cat. Enkrid thought that Jackson might be able to defeat the assassin. However, he could not bring Jackson with him without authority, even if he could. This was a challenge he had to face himself. Enkrid then approached Jackson and asked him if someone tried to stab him in the back what he would do to stop it. Jackson thought for a moment and replied that no one had ever survived his ambush. Jackson noticed Enkrid deep in thought. He told him that he needed eyes on the back of his head. Enkrid asked what that meant. Jackson said he would demonstrate. He told Enkrid to look at the wagon behind the tents. Enkrid looked and wondered how Jackson noticed something so far away. The wagon fell apart just as Jackson predicted. Enkrid asked if Jackson was a prophet. Jackson explained that he heard the sound of cracking from the wagon's axle. If you cannot hear what is around you, then you cannot predict what will happen next. Enkrid thought about how Jackson could hear something so quiet. Jackson continued that you do not need to see to sense what is around you. You should listen to your surroundings to practice and isolate sounds. Enkrid said it was a nice explanation and noted that Jackson seemed too lazy to respond properly before. Jackson replied that he was lazy, but it was better to do this than have Enkrid on his heels. That night Enkrid reflected on his second wall in the form of a faceless death. He believed he could live if he could sense them. He heard the usual noises, the footsteps of the patrol, the sound of the torch, but he could not locate the assassin who had already infiltrated. He was killed again by the poison needle. The next morning he thought he had not taken a single step forward, but his body remembered everything. The experience of learning the heart of the beast and the stab. Jackson told him that sound could give much information. You could tell the location of something from the intensity and direction of sound. Once you could hear distant sounds, your ears would be like a second pair of eyes. Sound was a wave that rang out in all directions. In the chaos of thousands of sound waves you needed to isolate a single one. Enkrid stood and concentrated on his surroundings. He heard the conversations of fellow soldiers. The flags that seemed like one sound, but he could now tell how many there were. On the right, he heard people walking. He told himself to feel the wave, the familiar sounds and the unfamiliar ones. Krang approached and asked what kind of training that was. Night came again. More failures followed. 33 attempts, then 34. Still failures. Enkrid decided he did not need more experience or sudden realization. He needed to keep repeating the same thing. He trained until he finally grasped the technique. When he opened his eyes, Krang was in front of him. Krang was surprised that Enkrid noticed him. He asked if Enkrid was training his perception. Enkrid replied that he was. That night came again. This time Enkrid avoided the needle and struck back. The assassin was shocked. Enkrid told him he was no longer the faceless death. The assassin was weaker in combat compared to the enemies Enkrid had faced before. He believed he could handle him. Looking around, he saw that Vengeance had already been poisoned by a needle. Krang was still alive but scared. Enkrid reminded himself that the assassin was still experienced. A knife was thrown at him which he dodged. The tent was torn open as the ferry company commander entered. Enkrid thought that if he did not strike first he would die. He charged forward with intent to kill. Behind him, the assassin threw multiple poison needles at him and Krang. The fairy leapt over Enkrid, dodged his attack, and saved Krang from the needles. Enkrid realized she was not there to kill him but to protect. He used the stab technique on the assassin. The attack was deflected and the assassin fled. Krang told Enkrid that the assassin was probably after him. Enkrid agreed. Krang asked how he knew. Enkrid said no one would pay to kill a boot like him or Vengeance. The fairy confirmed his reasoning and then prepared to attack Enkrid. He believed she wanted no witnesses and was ready to fight. Krang stopped her, saying he did not want anyone to die today. The fairy bowed and agreed. Krang asked if the platoon commander was still alive. The fairy replied they had the antidote. Krang then said they needed to erase all traces of the assassin to prevent trouble. Enkrid burned the tent to remove the evidence. Soldiers rushed to put out the fire. 2 people had survived and the assassin's trail was gone. Later, Krang walked in the forest with the fairy. She told him that if Enkrid had not slowed the assassin down, Krang would be dead. She asked if he had changed his mind about Enkrid. Krang admitted he had and thought to himself that Enkrid had rubbed off on him. He planned to meet him again. Enkrid is at where he meet Death. Death appeared to Enkrid. His scythe was breaking apart. He told Enkrid he would see him again. Enkrid replied he would be ready anytime. The next morning, Enkrid finally completed the day he had been repeating. He could now sense most things but not the fairy. He knew he had much to do when he returned. On the way back, Vengeance asked why Enkrid had saved him from the fire. Enkrid replied it was because they were comrades. Vengeance warned him that a rumor was spreading that the base was cursed. When Enkrid returned, he saw Rem and Ragna fighting and attacking anyone in their way. He thought they might as well be his curse. Seeing him approach, they said they thought he had died. Enkrid replied that he had not, but they had almost driven him crazy. It had been 3 days since Enkrid returned to his squad. One morning Jackson tried to leave quietly, but Enkrid rose at his footsteps. Jackson remarked on his progress and told him to keep training as it would prove useful one day. With fewer battles because of winter approaching, Enkrid decided it was the perfect time to push himself as much as possible. On his way back from training, Enkrid saw Odin doing push-ups with a boulder on his back. Odin greeted him and praised his discipline. He reminded Enkrid that a well-trained body was a weapon, but also teased him for being too thin. Enkrid replied that he would try harder, though he thought to himself that Odin's size was excessive. Back at camp, Rem and Ragna were fighting again. Enkrid told them to stop and reminded Ragna that it was his turn to cook. Ragna agreed and left while Enkrid warned Rem not to pick fights out of boredom. Rem admitted the lack of battles made him restless and demanded a duel. Enkrid agreed. During the spar, Enkrid tried to stay calm and used the beast's heart technique to sharpen his senses. He remembered everything he had practiced through countless deaths. Yet Rem easily trapped his sword and threw him down. He mocked Enkrid for being less interesting than before and asked if he had anything new to show. Enkrid stood again and declared that this time he was different. He promised to destroy Rem. Rem admitted that while Enkrid lacked skill, there was something about his determination that never grew dull. Their duel ended when rain began to pour and the squad retreated into their tent. Inside, Kraze complained about the constant rain ruining his duels. He spoke of a curse spreading through the army. There were strange fires and rising casualties, and the scout squads suffered the most. He named Jack, Bo, and Rotten, who were all hurt. Enkrid dismissed the idea and said the higher-ups would not like such rumors. Kraze then noticed Enkrid standing at the entrance in the heavy rain. Enkrid explained he was training his senses. Jackson approved while Rem mocked him, but Enkrid continued his focus. The squad kept busy inside. Odin suggested training that could be done even while lying down. Ragna offered to check Enkrid's stance again. Rem thought to himself that despite appearances, Enkrid was beginning to earn recognition. Elsewhere, the company commanders discussed the worsening war. One suggested sending a scouting party before winter. The fairy recommended the leader of the 444th squad. Another officer mocked the idea and called Enkrid useless, but the fairy defended her choice. She explained that it was a fairy's instinct and insisted he could bring unexpected results. The next morning, Enkrid stood before the fairy and received his new mission. He was being sent to lead a scout. Back at the squad tent, his comrades reacted with concern. Rem offered to find a way to get him out of it, but Enkrid refused. He knew he could not avoid orders. Ragna even volunteered to go in his place, but Enkrid denied him. Jackson gave advice about listening for strange sounds in the grass, while Rem scolded him for teaching tricks again. Despite their arguments, Enkrid thought about how important his squad was. He knew they were strong warriors and needed to stay behind. Unlike them, he considered himself less vital in direct battle. The reconnaissance team set out, and Enkrid decided it was the perfect chance to train his senses. There he met Andrew Gardner, the head of the squad. Andrew treated Enkrid with little respect and mocked him for leading a group of misfits. His men also ridiculed Enkrid and claimed he was unskilled. Andrew's leadership quickly proved careless as he shouted loudly during a scouting mission and mistook gazelle tracks for wildebeest. The squad wasted an entire day chasing animals that did not exist. During this time, Enkrid grew closer to Henry, a skilled hunter who saw through Andrew's mistakes. Henry gave Enkrid useful tips about tracking and survival. The next morning, Andrew pushed the team to cross tallgrass fields, and even spoke of capturing enemy scouts despite their true mission only being to check the area. Henry found it strange that there were no signs of animals in the grass, which usually held plenty of food. As they advanced, Enkrid sensed danger. A black puma with piercing blue eyes crossed his path, and immediately after, arrows rained down. The enemy ambushed them. Andrew panicked and shouted to run. One by one, the reconnaissance team was slaughtered until only Enkrid remained with enemies still pursuing him. Enkrid ran through the tall grass as the sound of crossbows filled the air. Jackson's training had allowed him to see sound itself and avoid incoming arrows. Yet there was a problem. He could not distinguish the sounds apart. At most, it only helped him sense danger. Dozens of arrows rained down on him. No matter which way he ran, enemies blocked his path. If he moved east, he was shot by more than 20 crossbows. If he went north, soldiers with spears surrounded him. The enemy was relentless and used camouflage to blend into the tall grass. Each time he died, time repeated. During one reset, Andrew Gardner shouted for the squad to move. He insisted that their mission was to capture Aspen's reconnaissance team. But Enkrid realized that something was hidden in this field. The endless ambushes and the presence of a flag among the enemy confirmed that Aspen was protecting something important. Enkrid decided he could not survive alone. If he wanted to break free from the loop, he needed the squad's strength. When Andrew barked orders, Enkrid refused to obey. He declared that he would lead instead. Andrew challenged him to a duel. With nothing but his bare hands, Enkrid dodged Andrew's sword and struck him down with a single blow. Shocked silence spread through the squad. Enkrid then addressed them. He reminded each soldier of their dreams. Henry wished to settle down with a widow who owned a flower shop. Another had a newborn child. Others wanted to save money or return to their hometown. Even Andrew revealed that his goal was to restore the fallen house of Gardner. Enkrid told them that the only way to realize their dreams was to survive. He declared that from now on, everyone would play their part as a team. He gave the first order to Henry, who fired an arrow as directed. An ambush was triggered. Enkrid immediately commanded the squad to follow him. If they wanted to turn this hopeless battle into an advantage, they had to strike first. Enemy soldiers patrolled the tall grass when a voice shouted. Someone had been spotted. Andrew Gardner moved quickly and stabbed the soldier from behind. Enkrid thought about the best way to reduce their numbers. He knew that if Andrew attacked, then his guardian knight would follow. That would raise their chances of success. 12 enemy soldiers were quickly reduced to 8. The survivors called for help. Enkrid ordered his men to annihilate them. He realized the enemy struggled to locate them in the tall grass. In past loops they had been discovered because of a black puma that roamed the field. This time Enkrid hunted the hunter and saved the beast. He thought back to the first time he lived this day. The enemy had found them by chance while chasing the animal. Now the chase distracted them long enough for the squad to stay hidden. Enkrid vowed not to let the puma die. Thanks to the beast they were able to defeat the enemy troops. Henry confirmed the area was clear. Enkrid gave the order to move. He thought about the men he had lost. Only 6 remained. He had tried many times to save them all, but it was impossible. This was the best result he could achieve. With the knowledge gained from repeating the day, he now knew the location of each enemy squad. He reminded himself that moving forward blindly would lead to death at the hands of 30 crossbows. They had to go around and deal with the spear squad first. Only then would they move safely. The group pressed on. Andrew Gardner's bodyguard noticed his lord was exhausting himself. He feared they would be trapped once the sun set. Enkrid urged them to keep moving while daylight lasted. The bodyguard questioned his orders and even raised his sword to Enkrid's throat. He threatened to kill him if he insisted on leading them into danger. Enkrid reminded him that there was no way back to camp. The enemy had already blocked all paths. He declared that he also wished to live and that following him was their only chance. Andrew Gardner watched closely. At first he thought Enkrid was useless like his own father who had ruined their family. But now he realized he had misjudged him. Andrew remembered his mother's words. Even if their family name fell, he must become a man who could lead others and regain honor. Looking at Enkrid, he wondered if this corporal was such a man. Enkrid told the squad to trust him. He promised that they would survive. Andrew Gardner then stepped forward and declared that he trusted their squad leader. His words silenced the bodyguard. From that moment, everyone followed Enkrid's command. Enkrid explained his plan. The first step was to attack before discovery so the enemy could not surround them. The second was to reach a special location. He had found this place through countless failures. Only here at this exact time could they avoid enemy patrols. Everything had gone as planned so far. The final step would take place when the sun went down. He knew that darkness was the reason they had failed to escape before. The squad finally reached their destination. Henry and the bodyguard were shocked. In front of them was the enemy camp. They questioned why Enkrid had brought them straight to danger. But Enkrid had seen this before in past loops. Aspen's army tried to kill anyone they found in the field because they were hiding something important. Among bones of animals stood a flag. Enkrid looked at it, and thought about what would happen if something more urgent than catching them occurred. He told the squad to move forward. If that happened, he believed they would surely find a way out. Inside the enemy camp, Mac argued with Enkrid. He said it was madness to set the camp on fire while they were surrounded. One wrong move and they would all be annihilated. Enkrid demanded to know his name. The bodyguard introduced himself as Mac. Enkrid warned him that he would not allow insubordination. Mac cursed but was silenced by Andrew Gardner. Enkrid moved forward with the squad behind him. Mac thought about how dangerous the situation was. There was no moonlight to guide them. Their only hope was the corporal leading them. Yet something strange happened. Enkrid cut through the enemy barracks with ease. The camp was empty. Mac was shocked. They had not run into a single soldier. It felt as if Enkrid knew the camp backwards and forwards. He wondered how that was possible. They finally reached the enemy flag. Enkrid ordered them to stop. He recalled how many times he had infiltrated this place. The first time he went for the flag, every soldier had chased him. He explained that the Aspen army's highest priority was to guard the flag. If it caught on fire, then their focus would shift to saving it. That would be their chance to escape. Mac wondered if Enkrid had known about the flag from the start. He suspected a secret mission. Enkrid told the squad they would split into 2 teams. One team would distract the soldiers. The other would set the flag on fire. Mac volunteered for the diversion. Enkrid was surprised at his sudden change in attitude but accepted. He thought about how many times he had brought the squad to this camp. This was the first time so many had survived. It felt like their best chance yet. Mac distracted the soldiers. Enkrid took a torch and prepared to set the flag on fire. A soldier appeared without making a sound. He cut the torch before Enkrid could act. Enkrid realized this enemy was different. He had never seen him before. The soldier called him a rat. Enkrid told him he was too late. But before the soldier could act, someone shouted. The barracks were on fire. Andrew had already set them ablaze. The enemy soldiers rushed to put out the flames. Enkrid saw that Mac had drawn away most of the soldiers. He had taken the attention of the last one. Andrew had finished the mission. Now all that was left was to escape. Enkrid lunged with all his strength. His attack was perfect, but the mysterious soldier avoided it easily and struck him across the side. Enkrid was shocked. It had been his most flawless thrust yet. The soldier mocked him as pathetic. Enkrid realized he could not win at his current skill level. He had died countless times just to reach this far. But this soldier was a new wall standing before him. To attack recklessly now would mean brutal slaughter. He thought about how he would have to take command again. He would have to cross the field again. He would have to repeat the day again and again. Even if it meant dying dozens of times more. The soldier asked if he was smiling. Enkrid swore in his mind that he would defeat him. The enemy promised to butcher him and feed him to the dogs. Enkrid declared that he would surmount this wall no matter how many times it took. Enkrid clashed swords with a powerful and skilled enemy. He thought about how his strike was parried. The enemy swung upward immediately. Enkrid realized the speed and accuracy were beyond him. He had no time to counter. The gap in skill was too wide. Pushed back, Enkrid threw a knife, but the enemy blocked it with the back of his hand. Enkrid was left in a desperate position. At that moment a soldier shouted that the fire was spreading. The enemy blade grazed Enkrid's ear. It could have been a fatal blow but was interrupted. The soldier turned and saw flames spreading toward the flag. Oil had been poured everywhere. The platoon leader was urged to focus on the fire. The soldier glared at Enkrid and admitted he was not one to give up easily. He warned they would meet again and stepped back. Enkrid wondered if this man was not the true wall he needed to overcome. Even if he was not that wall, Enkrid knew he still had to grow stronger. Andrew Gardner shouted for the leader to retreat. Enkrid watched his enemy walk away, then sheathed his sword. He ordered everyone to retreat. His squad fled while the enemy focused on the flames. As they ran, Enkrid realized that one man had gone missing. Only 5 of them remained. Mac asked if they were safe and if no pursuit would follow. Enkrid said it was unlikely. Soon after, enemy soldiers appeared and ordered to cut them down. The squad fought and killed them quickly. Enkrid urged his men to keep running. Henry suggested heading toward the habitat of foxes and snakes. The enemy would not follow them there. Mac worried they would also be trapped. Henry explained that he knew a hidden hunter's path. Enkrid trusted him and gave the order to follow. The sound of pursuit faded. Enkrid thought they had survived thanks to Andrew and Mac's courage and Henry's guidance. Everyone had given their all to make it this far. The sun rose and shone on his face. They ran until they reached camp. Henry collapsed and asked permission to pass out. Enkrid thought that one day had ended and a new one had begun. Back at the enemy camp, the flag was half burned. Soldiers spoke of preparing again. They were humiliated that the feared Grey Dog Company had failed to catch a handful of men. The Grey Dog Company was a special unit within the Asfen army. They took their name from the Grey Dog of the Asfen Principality. The company leader asked if the man faced in battle was a worthy opponent. Platoon leader Mitch Hurrier said he would have won if not for the fire. The leader said Enkrid escaped by luck, but warned that luck would not save him twice. Hurrier swore he would not allow it again. Back in camp, Enkrid thought about the wall he could not overcome. He wished he could have kept fighting. Both Hurrier and Enkrid swore to themselves that they would defeat the other. One vowed to kill. The other vowed to overcome. Back at the camp, Rem was bored and restless. He thought about how long their squad leader had been gone, and even wondered if Enkrid might have died. Rem admitted that Enkrid had improved recently, but he was still inexperienced. Ragna woke up and saw Rem sitting there. He asked what Rem was looking at. Rem showed him a finger and Ragna copied him. The two immediately started fighting again as usual. Inside the camp, the fairy spoke with Enkrid. She asked if he really discovered the hidden enemy by chance and infiltrated their camp, and set fire to it also by chance. Enkrid replied that they only acted according to the options they were given, and were very lucky. The fairy was surprised. She had expected results but not at this level and wondered who Enkrid truly was. Andrew Gardner then approached. He bowed and apologized for being disrespectful. He said they owed Enkrid their lives and asked if they would see him again. Enkrid answered that maybe they would meet again on the battlefield. Andrew and the other survivors bowed deeply in respect. Enkrid thought about his mission. Those 4 had survived, but he still lost 2 men. He blamed himself for not being strong enough to save them. By repeating yesterday, he had gone beyond his limits. He was no longer struggling just to survive. He realized he had to chase the dream of knighthood he always wanted. Outside the tent, soldiers noticed Ragna and Rem still fighting. Their eyes were sharp and intense. Enkrid thought he had never seen such looks from them before. They had sparred many times but never with that kind of power. He realized they never had to go all out against him. His new goal became clear. He wanted to fight until his men showed those same eyes against him. Ragna noticed Enkrid watching. Rem scolded him for hiding like a wild cat and told him to rest. Ragna saw Enkrid's wound and warned him about it. Enkrid brushed it off as a scratch but still tried to analyze Rem's block against Ragna's attack. Rem told him to stop worrying and get rest. Ragna seemed like he wanted to say something but held back. At dawn the battalion commander ordered the infantry to move closer to the tall grass where the enemy was hiding. Enkrid noted that his injury was healing and used every chance to train and reflect. Kraze warned him to rest but Enkrid insisted he would not be long. Rem muttered that he was pushing himself too hard. The next morning Ragna woke to the sound of training. He thought about his own talent with the sword. Fighting had always come naturally to him. He once considered knighthood but found it boring and saw no reason to devote himself to it. That lack of purpose left him with no real path. He then watched Enkrid training. Enkrid swung his sword despite the pain in his body. Ragna noticed that Enkrid never learned the basics properly. His form was full of bad habits. By logic he should not be able to grow much stronger. Yet Ragna wondered why Enkrid was still pushing himself so hard in spite of his wounds. Ragna asked why he trained so hard. Enkrid answered simply that it was to become strong. Ragna pressed him on what he would do once he gained strength. Enkrid declared he would become a knight. He described the knight he dreamed of. A man who wields his sword to protect the poor and the weak and those he loves. One who follows his beliefs in the name of honor. Ragna reflected on these words. To Enkrid the sword was only a means. Honor and conviction were the true purpose. Ragna questioned what the sword meant to him and what he truly wanted. He admitted he could not know without walking that path himself. At last Ragna turned to Enkrid. He asked his squad leader if he would like to learn proper swordsmanship. Enkrid begins training with Ragna. Ragna tells him to forget every technique he has learned except the beast heart and the lunge. Even the Valen mercenary style must be abandoned. Enkrid agrees and says he will start building anew. Ragna gives him his longsword, saying it is a better fit for his strength. When Enkrid grips the weapon too tightly, Ragna questions him. Enkrid admits that Rem taught him to hold it that way. Ragna insults Rem and begins sparring with him. Enkrid blocks but feels pain from the vibrations running through his hands. Ragna explains that if he holds his sword too stiffly, he will break like a branch. Enkrid realizes that he must learn to stay flexible. Ragna continues to criticize his stance, his balance, and even calls his movements clumsy. At first Ragna doubts that Enkrid can learn the basics, but when Enkrid rises again despite exhaustion, he decides to continue teaching. The lesson is interrupted when Rem arrives. He notices Enkrid has been training instead of eating. He mocks Ragna and even taps his axe on his shoulder. Ragna responds by threatening to cut off his hand. Their exchange ends quickly when Rem reveals that the army is being mobilized. The enemy is approaching. The soldiers assemble under Fairy's command. Enkrid takes his place with his squad. While Ragna thinks that this may not have been the best time to teach new skills, he decides to fight near Enkrid to protect him. As the enemy appears, strange formations with flags are spotted. Suddenly, a thick fog spreads across the battlefield. Soldiers panic as they lose sight of each other. Enkrid shouts for arrows, but the warning comes too late. Fairy orders everyone to take cover and raise their shields, realizing they have fallen into an unexpected trap. The fog is revealed to be a powerful spell called the Fog of Massacre, created by an enemy magician. The sorcery allows the enemy to see clearly while hiding their movements. They begin a one-sided attack. The magician boasts of the sacrifices and effort it took to complete the spell. Mitch Hurrier, one of the enemy soldiers, comments that the spell nearly failed when the flags were almost destroyed. The magician admits that it wouldn't have failed, if not for one soldier who interfered. Arrows rain from the front. Enkrid manages to avoid one strike but the chaos grows worse. Ragna calls out for him to keep his head down. He hears Rem's voice in the distance, shouting about sorcery, yet even with his allies so close he cannot make out their faces. His breathing grows heavy. His body feels tense. He recalls Ragna's warning that without mastering the basics he would simply fall back into old habits. Ragna had even told him it might be better not to fight at all until he truly understood. But on the battlefield, Enkrid cannot avoid fighting. Enkrid charges forward, determined to find his path. A spear pierces his throat and he collapses. His last thought is that he will return to learn from Ragna again. The loop resets. Back on the training grounds, Ragna questions why he keeps falling. Enkrid thinks to himself that Ragna is not a good teacher. His explanations feel vague because they come from the perspective of a natural genius. What seems simple to Ragna feels impossible to him. Yet Enkrid refuses to give up. He repeats every movement again and again until he can hold his sword correctly and control his footwork. The day resets again. On the battlefield Enkrid blocks an arrow. His body is still stiff but he accepts it. He dies once more and returns to training. He notes that this is the 30th time he has lived this day. His movements are slowly improving. Ragna notices his progress and begins teaching him the basics of swordsmanship. He explains the slice, the thrust, and the slash. He teaches about blocking and about the line of attack. Enkrid imagines his opponent with every swing and applies what he learns. The loop continues. Enkrid avoids a spear that once killed him. His feet feel lighter. dodging becomes easier. Arrows still bring him down, but each death carries progress. Ragna begins to see changes in him. He notices deflections and improvements that once seemed impossible. Enkrid keeps advancing even as he dies over and over again. On the 100th day, Ragna stares at him with a new expression. He asks who Enkrid really is. Enkrid realizes he has become someone unrecognizable to his teacher. The growth he once thought impossible is becoming real. Back on the battlefield, Enkrid smiles even when struck. The pain no longer breaks him. His goal is clear. The path of the night lies beyond suffering. He begins to enjoy the cycle itself. The loop resets once more. Ragna finally offers to teach him proper swordsmanship. Enkrid accepts without hesitation. He knows that if it means becoming stronger, he will gladly die 1,000 times. Ragna noticed Enkrid's skill and questioned if he had been pretending to be weak all along. Enkrid denied it, but Ragna pointed out that he already knew the fundamentals. What he lacked was field experience. On the battlefield, Enkrid thought about his repeated lives. He had lived the same day over 200 times. This time he was determined to test his skills directly. He memorized when enemies would emerge from the fog and struck them even without seeing them. Soldiers panicked as they were picked off one by one while Enkrid stayed low to the ground. Enemy soldiers surrounded him, mocking his chances of survival. Enkrid challenged them to put down their crossbows and fight him directly. He wanted to test himself further. But one soldier called him mad before crossbow bolts ended his life. As death arrived, a voice mocked him. Was he truly so desperate that he ran into his own end? Enkrid then awoke again in his bed, back at the start of the same day. He wondered if death only appeared to taunt him. Later, Enkrid thought about Rem. During battle, Rem always shouted about sorcery when the fog appeared. Enkrid questioned why soldiers formed around flags that seemed useless in real combat. He asked Rem what he knew about sorcery. Rem explained that unlike magic, sorcery required mediums. Without a medium, sorcery could not exist. Enkrid realized the flags themselves were the mediums that created the fog. Destroying them would erase the sorcery. Hearing this, Enkrid decided to go train. At the training ground, Ragna explained that they shared the same basics. He told Enkrid of the 5 forms of swordsmanship created by Leonisis Oniak, a genius from 500 years ago. Despite a tragic fate that left him paralyzed, Leonisis had shaped the history of swordsmanship forever. Ragna compared modern sword styles from across the continent and mentioned a technique called Beast Heart. He explained it as focusing only on the fight. Enkrid tried to understand but was suddenly attacked, Ragna's blade grazing his neck. The strike was faster than anything he had faced before. Rem was furious, accusing Ragna of trying to kill Enkrid. Ragna argued that a soldier's concentration peaked at the brink of death. The two began insulting each other, calling one another barbarians, until Enkrid stopped them. Ragna explained that the sole point of focus allowed everything else to disappear, leaving only the clash of blades. Enkrid realized it was similar yet different from Beast Heart. He set his new goal. He would destroy the flags, the mediums that powered the enemy's sorcery. Though it would be easier with Ragna or Rem, Enkrid wanted to see how far he could go alone. Enkrid struggled to master the sole point of focus. He died again and again without being able to use it properly. He trained his hearing to survive assassins. He strengthened the Beast Heart by being stabbed and trampled on the battlefield. But sole point of focus remained beyond his grasp. At the training ground, Ragna explained that when successful, the tip of the opponent's sword should appear slower. Enkrid tried but failed. He wondered if the courage of Beast Heart was interfering but dismissed the thought. Ragna said everything except the sword should fade and its path should become clear. Back on the battlefield, Enkrid commanded the soldiers to take cover. He had repeated the day 300 times. Alone, he tore through enemy lines and advanced without fear. Soldiers were terrified of him, but he pressed on. He reached one of the flags and destroyed it. Yet the fog did not vanish. He was killed from behind. The enemy revealed the truth. Only one of the 6 flags was real. The others were decoys. Enkrid began the cycle again. Days of loops passed. After 3 days, he reached another flag, but it was false. 5 days later, he reached a 3rd flag, but it too was a decoy. 7 days later, he destroyed a 4th flag, but again the fog remained. Only 2 flags were left. He reasoned that the innermost flag was most likely the real one. On another loop, he shouted for shields and Rem cursed the sorcery. Enkrid called for Rem to follow him. His plan was simple. Rem would draw the enemy's attention while Enkrid infiltrated to reach the final flag. He taunted the soldiers and sought the one behind the sorcery. Enkrid thought of the countless deaths he had endured. He had spent an entire year trapped in the same day, but the final moment for the fog had arrived. At last he reached the last flag and prepared to strike. Before he could destroy it, a blade blocked his own. A man named Mitch Hurrier appeared. He called Enkrid's presence a prayer answered. He declared that he had always wished to be the one to kill him. Enkrid asked who he was. Mitch was enraged that Enkrid had forgotten him after only a few days, but for Enkrid those days had been stretched into a year of endless repetition. Enkrid demanded that his opponent reveal his name. Mitch Hurrier replied that he would make him remember after stabbing him. Enkrid dodged the attack with ease and countered. Mitch was stunned. He wondered if this was the same soldier he had once faced. Enkrid had improved far beyond measure. He fought as if he could win in a single step. Enkrid focused all his senses. He recognized Mitch's style as a mix of the upright blade and the gentle blade that deflected attacks. Every nerve in his body locked onto the battle. He abandoned thoughts of victory or even the flag. In that moment there was nothing except swords. Mitch managed to stab Enkrid. The pain made him remember. Mitch had been the one guarding the flag in the grass field. Mitch introduced himself as a platoon leader of the Grey Dog Company. Enkrid gave his own name and title as a squad leader of the Kingdom of Nerillia. Soldiers nearby noticed how far the enemy had advanced. Mitch explained that Enkrid was skilled at sneaking but seemed disappointed. Enkrid realized the truth. Ragna had been wrong about fear of death. What he needed to focus on was a worthy rival, someone who could truly endanger his life. Mitch thought Enkrid was a deranged soldier. The loop began again. Back on the battlefield, Enkrid called for Rem and also told Ragna to follow. Both were shocked but obeyed. Together they tore through enemy forces. Enkrid once again faced Mitch Harrier. He greeted him as a friend and challenged him to a duel. Mitch asked if Enkrid had come just to fight him. Enkrid spoke boldly and even joked that he had fallen for him since their first meeting. Mitch laughed and said his company was known as the Tenacious Suitors. Enkrid was the first enemy to seek him out. They clashed once again. Enkrid tried to maintain focus but was killed. Mitch asked how he could face him with such courage only to fall so easily. Enkrid realized his mistake. He could not force the state of focus. He had to be drawn to it naturally. He repeated the loop again and again. On the 18th attempt he felt the focus appear. On the 28th attempt he could enter it at will. By the 48th attempt he had reached mastery. On the training ground Ragna tested him once more. Enkrid saw Ragna's blade in slow motion and deflected it. Ragna was stunned. He asked if Enkrid had just used the sole point of focus. Enkrid confirmed it and thought. He had gained complete control over his sword and body. When Ragna asked where he was going, Enkrid answered simply. He was going to see the company commander. The time had come to overcome this day. Enkrid requested an audience with the fairy. He explained what he had recalled during the reconnaissance mission. The Aspen soldiers had been calling a strange man a sorcerer. The fairy listened as Enkrid shared everything he could. He did so in order to achieve victory on the battlefield. The scene shifted to the front lines. He reminded himself that the rest was up to the commanding officers. His task was clear. The wall he had to overcome stood before him. Mitch Harrier. Mitch recognized him and asked how he knew his name. Enkrid declared that he had wanted to settle things since their first encounter. The day had finally come to defeat him. Enkrid attacked but Mitch avoided. Mitch countered and Enkrid braced his sword like a shield to withstand the blow. Mitch was surprised by his skill. He questioned if Enkrid had been hiding his true ability. Enkrid focused. He shifted his weight to his right foot and prepared for a diagonal cut. The techniques he had trained. The experience he had gained through countless repetitions. All of it came together before his eyes. His blade managed to cut Mitch but the strike was not fatal as Mitch ducked in time. Mitch grew unsettled. He had believed he would overwhelm Enkrid within a few exchanges. He wondered if they could truly be equals. He told himself it was impossible. His style used both upright and gentle blades. A single blow would not be enough to defeat him. He then prepared his most powerful strike. A large sweeping arc from below. Enkrid anticipated it. He had fallen to that move dozens of times in the past loops. But now he welcomed it. He read the arc and deflected it. Mitch was stunned that his attack had been predicted and countered. Enkrid finally struck a decisive blow. Mitch coughed blood as Enkrid approached. Mitch admitted his overconfidence. He had believed his attack would land. He declared that Enkrid was neither stronger nor more skilled than him. Enkrid agreed yet pointed out that he had still won. Mitch cursed his arrogance and regretted not striving harder. Enkrid acknowledged the fight had been enjoyable and prepared to finish him. Before he could strike, their commander intervened and stopped Enkrid. Soldiers shouted for Mitch to hold on as they carried him to safety. The commander acknowledged Enkrid's strength and promised that his death would not be painless. Enkrid realized he was still behind enemy lines. Destroying the flag and retreating alive would be difficult. He wondered if this new commander was today's wall. At the order, a rain of crossbow bolts and fire arrows descended upon him. Enkrid ran forward toward the Greyhound commander while arrows rained down. A few pierced his body but he endured them. He thought he could not evade every attack and would need to take some of the damage. The Greyhound commander called him a fool. With a single swing the heavy northern blade shattered Enkrid's sword. Enkrid realized he would die many times if he tried to fight him blade to blade. His true goal was victory in battle through the destruction of the enemy flag. He threw a knife but missed. He remembered that even slight damage to a sorcery medium made it useless. He threw again while dodging the enemy strike. This time the blade cut the flag. Elsewhere the fairy fought while thinking. She had reported that sorcery would appear on the battlefield and requested supplies, but her warnings had been ignored. She thought the kingdom was corrupt beyond saving. Suddenly the fog lifted and the battlefield cleared. An enemy soldier shouted that the flag was gone. The fairy saw her chance. The enemy was flustered. She called for a counterattack. Soldiers rallied and charged. She wondered who had undone the spell. She thought it might be that squad leader. Enkrid looked for his allies. He had expected to meet Rem or Ragna after destroying the flag, but neither could be found. On another part of the battlefield, Rem demanded the sorcerer be brought to him, or everyone would die. Ragna was with another squad and confused by what was happening. An enemy soldier mocked Enkrid. He told him to abandon hope. Before the blade could fall, a black puma appeared and struck down the attacker. Enkrid recognized it as the same beast he had once seen in the grass fields. The animal moved swiftly. It tore bowstrings apart and rendered them useless. Then it stood in front of him and growled at the enemy. Enkrid warned the soldiers to retreat. This was no ordinary puma. The Greyhound commander advanced in anger. Before he could act, someone placed a hand on Enkrid's shoulder. It was Vengeance. He told Enkrid to stand down and promised to save him. Vengeance struck the commander but was easily defeated. He cursed the man's overwhelming strength. He ordered his soldiers to fire, but the commander cut down the arrows as they flew. The puma leapt again but was thrown aside. The commander's heavy blade descended. Enkrid focused. He knew he could not stop the strike with force. He would deflect it instead. He let the blade slide off just as Mitch Hurrier had once done. The commander was shocked. He recognized the technique and demanded to know how Enkrid had learned it. Enkrid replied that it worked. The commander acknowledged his skill. He ordered a retreat and promised to remember his name. Enkrid told him to do as he wished. After the battle, Vengeance warned that Enkrid was losing too much blood. He insisted on retreat. Enkrid told him they must also take the puma. Vengeance scolded him for worrying about the beast when his own life was in danger. He shouted at the third platoon to fall back and cursed as Enkrid collapsed unconscious. In the darkness, Death appeared once more. It asked if Enkrid had gotten what he desired again. It called him a stubborn knave and questioned what gave him such determination. Enkrid woke up in his tent. He heard whispers and felt something furry in his hand. It was the black puma that had saved his life during the battle. Jackson was relieved to see him awake. He handed him water, but Enkrid was too weak to drink and the water spilled onto the puma. Cries explained that the physician said he was not permanently hurt. Enkrid thought back to the retreat and how he must have fainted. Jackson left to rest while Ragna also went to sleep. Enkrid told himself he had survived another day. Rem kept staring at him. When Enkrid asked why, Rem questioned how he knew it was sorcery. Enkrid thought of the time loop but decided not to reveal the truth. He gave a half answer, saying he had a friend from the frontier and learned from him. Rem was not convinced but warned him not to involve himself with sorcery. When asked about the battle, Rem explained he had slain the enemy who raised the flag. Enkrid realized that was why he never saw the sorcerer. Meanwhile, Krace tried to feed the puma but it roared. He revealed that it might be a mystical beast known as the Lake Puma. Its claws were worth 10,000 krona. Enkrid was shocked at the value. Days passed. Their army held ground but never claimed full victory. Enkrid stretched his body despite his wounds. Jackson warned him but he insisted he could handle light movement. Ragna told him to sleep while Rem scolded him for being careless. Enkrid then asked Rem and Ragna about swordsmanship. He explained that during battle he had performed a technique he never practiced. Rem told him that now he had learned to face the enemy directly, his skill and strength were growing naturally. Ragna added that once the fundamentals were learned, vision improved, but he admitted that it usually took hundreds of battles to reach that level. Enkrid thought of how he had repeated the same day again and again, until he perfected his movements. It was not luck. It was effort and desperation. He asked to spar. Both Rem and Ragna refused since his wounds were still fresh. At that moment the fairy commander entered. She asked if Enkrid was the one who destroyed the sorcery medium. Enkrid admitted it was him and claimed it was Fortune. She accepted his answer but left with a mysterious remark about their fates being intertwined. Enkrid wondered what she meant. His squad joked about his sudden importance but he stayed quiet. Then Kraze brought news of a squire from the Order of the Crimson Cloaks. Enkrid thought about the knights. They were the strongest warriors on the continent. Squires were chosen by knights and the most gifted became para-knights. For a squire to be sent alone meant he was close to reaching that rank. Soon after, the squire entered the battlefield. Enemy archers fired a storm of arrows. The squire crouched low as magic surged into his legs. In an instant he dashed forward. With a single swing of his blade, enemy soldiers were sent flying. Enkrid was amazed after seeing him. The battlefield was chaos. The enemy commander panicked as the squire cut through their forces with terrifying skill. Soldiers tried to stop him, but the commander was slain before he could act. Rem watched in awe, thinking this was truly a formidable warrior. Ragna believed if that was all it took, then one day he too could reach such strength. Jackson, however, thought the enemy were fools, wasting at least 5 chances to kill the squire. Auden prayed for the fallen, while Krace declared there was no need to retreat. The battle was already won. Enkrid studied the fight clay. He could sense the squire shifting between styles. The upright blade that drew enemies into defeat. The heavy blade that relied on brute force. The bewitched blade that confused opponents. The swift blade that overwhelmed with speed. And the gentle blade that deflected before counterattacking. Enkrid realized the squire used both heavy and swift together, styles that were completely different, yet all styles came from one source. By mastering their intersection, one could wield the sword as if it were alive. As the allied army charged, Rem rallied the madman squad, ordering them to protect Enkrid while he broke through his limits. Enkrid knew his realization changed nothing, except showing how far he still had to climb. He longed to see the view from the top. The allies overwhelmed the enemy, who lost the will to fight. They charged to finish them and redraw the kingdom's borders. The war was nearing its end, but peace was still far away. Enkrid narrated that the Appen Principality, ruled by 3 key families, would not rest. In the throne room, Grand Duke Aspen raged that the enemy broke the rule forbidding knights from entering battle. Ekins explained they used the Frog General's appearance as an excuse, since knights were needed to face such monsters. Hyria, head of the military house, promised to make the enemy pay. With Aspen withdrawing, Enkrid's company also returned home to the fortified border city. At a ceremony, the commander praised the soldiers and rewarded those who fought bravely. Enkrid was honored for defeating Aspen's sorcery. The other soldiers mocked him, calling him weak and a bootlicker. But Andrew Gardner silenced them, declaring Enkrid a greater man than they knew. Later, Kraze asked Enkrid where he would spend his award money, joking about women and drink. Enkrid said he wanted to buy a sword. Kraze was shocked, telling him standard weapons were enough and battlefields were filled with abandoned blades. But Enkrid knew better. To become a knight, one needed proper arms and the skill to prove it. He declared his time as a stagnant foot soldier was over. He would take the test for promotion.